In the old days, the heavy bulk cargo would have acted as the ballast. Peter now uses these bags of stone chippings to trim Shamrock, as he did on the first trial, but this time for a much longer voyage.
We thought, well, we're going to open up another little page of the old history book. We're going to have to do things that we've never done before. We had really never been out of the way of Rame Coast Guard Station. Someone could oversee us. Now we were told that we were going to go to Fowey.
Another dawn tide, and this time to a real destination. Fowey, 35 miles southwest of Plymouth. Everyone's praying for a fair wind, but even without one, the old bargees had a few tricks up their sleeves.
If there was no wind at all, Shamrock would have been moved about in the river and the tidal estuaries of Plymouth using the tides. They would have had long sweeps or oars which could be used to keep the vessel out of trouble. They could have even both jumped in the boat and towed her from ahead, or used long poles we call quants, and this is sufficient to reach the bed of the river and use them just like a punt.
At times in the first voyage we found that with the heavy weather that the little tug was incapable of doing the job that we required of her. So a safety factor said, well, look, let's look for something a little bigger if we get heavy weather. And that's the reason why we required a bigger tug.
Out to sea, they found just the breeze they wanted. It was time to reflect that thanks to the successful restoration, Shamrock today more than meets that traditional sailor's adage.
I mean, the old saying goes, really, when you come to join a sailing ship, the thing to look for is a shiny frying pan and a rusty bilge pump, because it means she's a good feeder and she don't leak.
Drink on old barges, the cheapest of them all was cider. And I think a lot of cider during the summer was drunk during the loading processes. It also numbed the mind against the repetitive job of just humping.
All right, I've got to try and tack now. I bore away a bit to get a bit of speed on the tack, but I'll have a go.
Yeah, go on, have a go.
All right, coming up.
Go and have a go.
Coming up.
Right over.
I'll try and sail around. Plenty of water there. These guys all sliding past the side.
Going by the head nicely. Going by the head nicely. Going
Can't get any more rudder than that though, so you've got to actually
Guide around.
Right.
Take a start.
coming up.
There she goes.
Well, we tacked with all sails set, even the jib race without work. That's a first.
Oh, that was splendid. There was no problem.
You're relaxed actually by knowing what to do. The relaxation on Shamrock, such as the weather, was so superb. In some cases, it really gives you a chance to sit down and enjoy the sunshine. But you must always be sort of conscious that you're going to be called on at any moment to perform any task for any emergency. Serenity, you see, is really a false prophet, because if you're serene at sea, then you're inviting disaster. We know that there were years that between Plymouth and Fowey, 20 wrecks occurred in a single year. You had sailed and the only thing that you had was the captain's discretion. You never had wireless. You certainly had no one to tell you what the weather was going to be. And so at the captain's discretion, you set sail. Now he was desperate to make a living, and he would set sail if he thought things were going to be all right.
Now, where are you heading for?
Well, I'm going to try and hopefully have a look at Polperra, but obviously...
There was time for the crew to admire the coastline.
I think Polperra easily, well, I'd love to see these two marks.
There was an extra bit of satisfaction for the National Trust members. Without the National Trust's Enterprise Neptune project, started in 1965 to buy up coastal land to protect it from unsightly development, the view might have looked very different indeed. Thanks to coastal conservation, the coastline here in Cornwall is less spoilt than any in Europe. It must have looked very much the same to Shamrock's old skippers as they searched for landmarks.
Fowey pilots, Sailing Barge Shamrock, over.
For Shamrock, it is a historic moment, for the old Shamrock's maiden voyage back in 1899 had been to Fowey, her cargo then more romantic than the ones she carried later, a deckload of skiffs needed for a local regatta. Fowey was the kind of place Shamrock's very first owners might have fallen out over, for they were brothers, one of whom liked to work round the clock, the other to knock off early to go ashore courting.
In the past, Shamrock perhaps could have tied up virtually anywhere. There were no end of small quays. This, I presume, would be just to go home for the night. They might even have had a couple of bicycles on deck. And they would perhaps tie up to a quay or even anchor somewhere, or put her on the mud somewhere and get ashore in the boat and pedal home for the night if they were close to home. I think people that look upon Shamrock with a certain amount of awe and wonder, along with things like farm carts and water wheels and windmills, they all come from a time not too distant past, when life was lived at a different pace. They perhaps look at Shamrock and think, well, you know, that's in my granddad's era.
The publicity side of Shamrock was well done by the National Trust and by the National Maritime Museum. And people were able to see who we were and to know of our coming. If people know what to expect, they will respond, and they responded handsomely. The public first coming at Fowey, they asked practically only one question. It's always, when was she built? And when you tell them when she was built, they ask where. And then they always say, why is it in such a good condition? And then you have to explain that it has been restored. Since the restoration of our Shamrock, she has been in a better state than she ever would have been as a working boat. So therefore, when people come down to see her, sometimes you have to tell them this to appreciate how fine a boat she is and how the upkeep of that boat has been, well, worked to the limit to ensure that she is 100%. They couldn't do it in the years gone by because of the economics.
It was the youngsters who asked the most questions. They were interested in things like, where does the captain live? And this sort of thing. Not much interested in the rigging-wise, but almost the domestic arrangements. Where's the loo?
But the Shamrock experience has given much valuable information on how to conserve wooden boats. With care, she could be good for another 100 years. For those aboard, it's been like a new maiden voyage.
Well, I think when we finally got to Fowey, there was something to celebrate, because it was firstly, and of course, the only time that we have successfully navigated outside the Sound. We had a port to which we could look forward to the evening. We had a program which we had kept to fairly well, even in light airs. So I think there was a great need to celebrate on finally getting to Fowey, not only on time, but to a marvellous reception.
Next morning, Shamrock was homeward bound in the mist, but nothing that would have troubled her old skippers.
The original people who actually worked and earned their living with Shamrock, I think, would be very pleased to know that she's a last survivor virtually, and is well looked after.
If Shamrock ever was sort of reincarnated to sail again, the trips to Fowey are proof that this is possible, that she is in a very, very good condition. Yes, it's an exciting thought that she is now ready to sort of spread her wings once more.